The living brain, in the process of thought, generates electrical energy. With me tonight on the program is Dr. Howard B Petzel, specializing in medical neurology. Dr. Petzel, we'd like to find out what forms of measurement or analysis are available today in examining the human mind, in particular this machine which we see in front of us, the electroencephalograph. What is this machine?
This machine is primarily designed to record the electrical activities generated by brain cells.
What are the main purposes of this?
The main purposes of the machine is to detect the presence or existence of certain abnormalities of the brain structure.
What are the most important indications that you obtain by this examination?
The most important indications are the presence of abnormal wave activities in the slow range activity.
What types of abnormalities or conditions can you determine?
Usually it is very useful in the diagnosis and aid of epilepsies, the presence of a brain tumor, brain abscess, or even a clot on the brain.
Is it possible, I think this is usually misconstrued by this examination, to determine whether a person is sane or intelligent or this type of
that is a frequent misconception. The electroencephalogram has no part in such a diagnosis.
Doctor, we'd like to see now how this actually works, if we could.
This is an EEG used to record electrical activity from the brain. Electrodes are placed over different areas of the scalp to record the electrical energy brought to the machine by a series of fine wires which are then utilized to form a graph on a moving strip of paper. Frequently, different types of interference artifact come into the electroencephalogram, such as eye blinking, which is demonstrated. Other types of artifact consist of clenching of the jaws, which is very characteristic, and also such as moving of the head from side to side. The usual recording time is approximately 20 minutes. Following the recording and the interpretation of the record is used as a diagnostic aid by the physician.
With me this evening is Dr. Norman B Stein, a man who has done much to further the use of hypothermia here in the Sacramento area. Dr. B Stein, could you briefly tell us what some of the major applications of hypothermia are?
The major applications of hypothermia are either surgical or medical. In surgery, we use it for surgical management of heart problems and brain surgery. In medicine, it is used to reduce the requirements of the tissues for oxygen and food and reduce their waste product accumulation, and thereby enhance the patient's chance for recovery.
Well, I'm certain the art has come a long way from its first few trials. What are the methods used today?
The methods used in cooling these patients may be simply that of the application of ice bags to the patients, or they can be wrapped in these blankets through which we circulate ice water and thereby cool the patient to the desired temperature.
Are there certain limitations as to how low you can take the body temperature?
In these medical problems, it's rare that we ever drop the temperature below 91 or 92 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, doctor, what methods do you have of determining the patient's condition during the cooling process?
Well, like any other medical problem, you follow the various measurements of the patient's situation. You follow his temperature on an electronic thermometer here. We follow his circulation through blood pressure and pulse rate, and just generally keep track of his respiratory pattern and his general welfare.
Well, the first thing that enters my mind is in cooling this person's temperature down, isn't it a little uncomfortable for him?
Yes, they would normally tend to shiver, but we avoid the shivering by administering a combination of drugs intravenously which prevents shivering. This is important because shivering does increase oxygen consumption and therefore defeats the purpose of our cooling.
Well, what are some of the important medical applications of this particular system?
Probably the most important would be classified any situation where there has been a prolonged period of asphyxia, as for example in drowning, in carbon monoxide poisoning, or in cardiac standstill from any cause whatsoever. Another particularly significant group are those patients who have had head injuries with reversible brain damage. And finally, there are those patients whose disease has an associated high temperature and in which the temperature is damaging to the patient. They are improved by reduction of temperature.
Are there other areas that you believe this will be a valuable aid?
Yes, there are. At the present, there are investigations underway in regard to treatment of heart attacks and burn patients. I think it will be eventually quite valuable in these two areas.
And I believe this also is a possible tool in space research, is it not?
It is, from the viewpoint that if we can reduce the body requirements for food, it certainly makes a long space trip more possible, not requiring the large volume of food.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barnstein, for being our guest. We're speaking tonight from the surgical suite of Sutter General Hospital. My guest is Dr. Lorenz Ruddy, who is going to show us how microsurgery can help restore hearing to many patients. Dr. Ruddy, what is microsurgery?
Microsurgery is applied to the ear, consists in using a surgical microscope such as we have here, and using very fine instruments to carry out the type of surgery that you mentioned.
How long has the technique been practical?
From a practical standpoint, where most of the hospitals have these type of microscopes and the ear surgeons are using them, I would say about in the past 5 years.
Well, what are the various types of ear problems that can be helped through microsurgery?
Infections of the ear and mastoid, injuries to the ear, skull fractures, broken eardrums, membranes, certain deafness that results from heredity, also from birth.
Well, do you
disorders.
Could you show us an example of one type of ear problem?
I have a diagrammatic chart here. This shows the ear, the outer ear, and the ear canal, the drum membrane, and the three little ear bones, and the inner ear that is bathed in fluid, and the nerve going to the brain. And one of the conditions that we correct the deafness is called otosclerosis. This means a hardening of the bone that occurs right at the third little ear bone as it goes into the internal ear. When sound comes into the ear and is transmitted through the drum membrane, through the ear bones, this little ear bone cannot move, and consequently it cannot reach the nerve of hearing. To correct this type of deafness, we make an incision in the posterior wall of the ear canal along here and move this back and the posterior half of the drum membrane forward and enter the middle ear. In this view, we are looking down the ear canal, at the end of which is the eardrum, through which we can see the handle of the first ear bone. This is our line of incision. We lift up the flap and fold the posterior half of the drum membrane forward, and here we see the handle of the second ear bone attached to the stapes, which is the third ear bone. In otosclerosis, this bone is fixed into the window, and this often has to be removed. One technique is to place a vein graft over the window and a piece of plastic tubing is placed over the window and fitted underneath the handle of the second ear bone. Another way is to use a piece of stainless steel wire wrapped around a short piece of vein or other soft tissue, and placing this as a plug in the window and crimping the wire over the handle of the second ear bone. So when the vibrations reach this, when the drum is placed back and passing through the ear chain, the vibrations are carried to the internal ear.
Well, Dr. Ruddy, thanks so much for giving your time here to explain this on tonight's Assignment Medicine.
Very welcome.